This week's episode of I Was a Teenage Film Snob is not brought to you by Kryptonite, for obvious reasons. Welcome to I Was a Teenage Film Snob. I'm James Chalmers, your friendly neighborhood film snob, and this week it's not a team show, it's not a pod squad, it's not a solo show. Well, I guess it's kind of a solo show. It is entirely solo. I have no guest, I have no team. It is smack bang in the middle of winter, so poor Maddie and Nick are a little bit unwell, a little bit under the weather. And I do have a bunch of guest shows lined up. I've got about 3 in the bank, and I've got a few more coming, so I could have used one of those. But I thought instead of going back to back with a guest, to do something a little bit different. I haven't done a solo show, a completely me alone show for a while. So if you're listening to this and you're hearing the content, you're like, oh my God, it's just him talking to himself. And you don't like that sort of thing, I guess tune out now. But it won't be too long. I just want to take the opportunity to celebrate the release of Superman. We haven't had a brand new standalone Superman film in theaters for over a decade. I haven't seen it yet. At the time of recording, I'm about 36 hours out from seeing it, maybe a little bit less. By the time this episode drops, I'll still be about 12 hours out from seeing it. So I couldn't get in until Sunday night, but I will be on my way to the theater tomorrow. And I'm very excited. If you've listened to the podcast up until now, you'll know I'm a big superhero fan. I love Marvel and DC equally. I was a bit late to the Superman party. My first Superman film was Man of Steel, and that really got me into the character. So I'm excited. I'm excited to enter this new era of DC. I loved what they did with the DCEU. I wish it could have continued. I'm not a huge fan of some of the mistakes they made, which I've made very clear on this show and others as well. But just like Superman, I feel like we should be up and away, onward and upward, move forward, and embrace the new. So, in honor of Kal-El returning to screens, I thought what I would do is do a bit of a list. I haven't done a list in a little while. And I thought what I would do is today, maybe for half an hour or so, maybe not even, go through some of my favorite DC films. So what I've done is I've painstakingly assembled my top 10 favorite DC films as of this minute, because I find my list changes quite a bit. So a couple of rules. I didn't go all Superman films. I know a couple of people are ranking the Superman films in anticipation of the release of the flick. I thought I'd go a little bit broader and go to DC in general, because I have seen every Superman film, I believe, but some of them I've only seen once, and I wanted to be fair. So what I'm doing is I'm expanding it to the entire DC catalog. So the rules around my list today are they must have been released theatrically. There is one exception to this, which you'll see in a moment. My dogs are barking, which is good. They're probably thinking about crypto, of course, because he's now hitting the screen as well. So yes, so the rules are, of course, they must have been released theatrically. There is one exception, as I mentioned. The other rule I made was I'm expanding beyond just the general DC catalog. So I don't just mean DC Comics. I've expanded it to Vertigo, to Wildstorm, to basically any film that would fall under the greater DC banner. Ironically, none of those films are really going to show up in my top 10 anyway, but there will be some honorable mentions. So this will go for, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes, maybe not even. I do like the sound of my own voice, clearly, because I keep talking. But I'll have a few honorable mentions first, because I wanted to pay some respect to some of the films that laid the groundwork for some films that maybe the only reason they're not in my top 10 is I haven't seen them enough. And when we get to the top 10, I'll explain what my criteria was for my favorites. They're not the best 10, but they're my favorites. But starting with our honorable mentions, I want to go with 1984 Supergirl. Historically, a very divisive film, mostly on the lower end. People aren't a huge fan of it. But I think at a time when it was rare to see superheroics on screen, I thought it was really ballsy to put out Supergirl. Supergirl is actually one of my favorite DC characters, not just favorite DC, one of my favorite superheroes. So it is kind of insane to think we got a Supergirl movie in the modern era before Batman, and I'm really pleased that we did. Helen Slater is great in it. It's a really fun flick. I've only seen it once or twice, so that's why it hasn't cracked my top 10. But I do really like it, and I think it's really underappreciated. So Supergirl. Next up for my honorable mentions is Swamp Thing. I watched that for the first time last year. Directed by Wes Craven, by the way, which is insane. Um, and it's pretty close to the Alan Moore comic. I really enjoyed it. It's definitely more adult. It's violent and it's got nudity, and it's not what you would expect from a comic book film of its era. And it wasn't really advertised as such, but it is, a Vertigo comic, which is owned by DC. And I think Swamp Thing is great. I think it's really underappreciated as well. But I've only seen it once, so I can't give it, a top tier spot. This next one might be the first truly divisive one, although people might also think the first two were. I'm going with 2011's Green Lantern. I love this movie. I never understood at the time why it didn't work. The trailers people didn't like. Every time that trailer came up, I couldn't wait to see it. When I finally did get around to watching it, I couldn't understand why people didn't like it. Now, granted, I hadn't read the Green Lantern comics at the time. I've read a handful now, and I know the character a bit better. But I think, like, ultimately, outside of the CGI, you got a pretty serviceable flick. Like, you could argue that the giant cloud was reminiscent of the Fantastic Four's version of Galactus, but I think despite the CGI costume, I think Ryan Reynolds is a pretty good Hal Jordan. I think Blake Lively is a pretty good Carol. I think there's a lot of good things about this film, and it is not as bad as its reputation kind of leads you to think. It's actually quite a fun film. Mark Strong is perfect as Sinestro. Michael Clark Duncan as Kilowog is great. I think there's some really good casting in there, and maybe there's a bit of dodgy CGI, but I think it's a totally enjoyable flick. The Dark Knight Rises is also in my honorable mentions. The Dark Knight Rises is my least favorite of the Nolan trilogy. I've talked about this a bunch. I don't think it's a bad film at all. I think it's a pretty good way to end a really great trilogy. It's just not a top tier film for me. This one's going to upset people. I apologize. Mask of the Phantasm, the Batman animated film from 1993, I want to say it was. Again, this is less about my feelings on the film and more, I just haven't seen it that much. I think I've seen it twice. I didn't watch it as a kid. I didn't see it for the first time until I was in my 20s. And because I was late to it, it didn't have that same return factor for me. Not that I don't think it's worth seeing again. I've got it on Blu-ray. I will check it out again probably in the next couple of weeks, to be honest. But I just haven't watched it a bunch, so I couldn't give it that top tier spot. Phantasm gets included because it was released theatrically on Christmas Day, no less. The other animated films I do really like, but they didn't get a theatrical release, so I'm keeping them out. Blue Beetle. I really like Blue Beetle. Blue Beetle was really fun. I think the year that Blue Beetle came out, I want to say was 2023. I think DC actually kind of found their feet a little bit. I know most people disagree with me because that was the year we had Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. We had Flash. We had Shazam! Fury of the Gods. 3 films that people really tear apart. Those films are fine. They're not, the same quality of stuff that, launched that franchise, but they are fun. There's good stuff in them. Shazam! Fury of the Gods makes me cry. And not for the way you guys are thinking. And Flash, CGI aside, there's a pretty good story in there, and I think Blue Beetle suffered because of the reputation the DC universe had gathered at that point. Because they announced that the universe was kind of shutting down, people didn't really pay attention to it. But Blue Beetle's a really good flick. Apparently, that character is going to appear in James Gunn's version of this universe. And I really hope so, because it was a really fun movie. The next two people might not even realize are DC films. They fall under those kind of more ancillary banners. But Stardust, starring Charlie Cox, a very young Charlie Cox and Claire Danes, based on the Neil Gaiman book, is a wonderful movie. Wonderful movie. So fun, so joyous, very reminiscent of The Princess Bride, and is technically under the DC banner, but you'll never hear people refer to it as a DC film. So that's on my list, as is A History of Violence, the Viggo Mortensen film. I believe that's a Vertigo title. The only reason that both of these films aren't in my top 10 is due to not seeing them enough. Stardust I've seen twice. History of Violence I've only seen once. I'm not familiar enough with them to talk about them knowledgeably. I'm sure if I rewatch them, they could easily crack the top 10 because they're brilliant movies. Oh boy, I've still got a few more honorable mentions, and these are going to rub people the wrong way, I think. First up, Batman 66. It's in my honorable mentions because it saved Batman. That TV show, particularly, but by extension, that movie as well. Batman was a dying comic. It wasn't a tier one comic at this time. It was going down the drain. People didn't care about it. And the Adam West show um, revived it. And that movie is really fun. It's not the Batman that we're used to from the 70s or 80s or even today. It's a very different Batman, but he absolutely has his place in the franchise. With that, and these next two I think are really going to upset people. Superman 78. I love that Chris Reeves Superman film. I haven't seen it very often. I didn't grow up on it. I only came to it maybe in the last 10 years. And I've seen it a couple of times, and it's right on the cusp. I think it's a great film. It is kind of the blueprint for every modern Marvel film. Kevin Feige himself has said they went back to Superman because of, the way that it's balanced. It's just not as personal to me. And that's the only thing. If I went back and rewatched it tonight, I would probably change my list. And that's why I also said my list is based on this minute and not anything else. Batman 89 is next. That one's also going to ruffle some feathers. I like it. I don't think it's the best in that franchise. I do really like it. It's not even like a watchability. There's other movies I like more, but I do like Batman 89. Coming back to the DCEU, I want to throw Shazam in there. I really like Shazam. I think at a time where the DCEU was getting confused and didn't quite know what it was doing, Shazam was a welcome change of pace. I thought it balanced the superheroics and the action with the humor and like the family dynamic quite well. I really enjoy that one. Say what you will about the politics of the guy who plays Shazam. At the time, he was the hero we needed. In 2019, when things were a little bit uncertain, I think Shazam was exactly what we needed. Another one that's going to perplex people, I'm throwing in Joker Folie à Deux. I know that it's the lowest rated DC film of all time. I went through the list. It has the worst cinema score, has the worst IMDb rating, I think. It's the most divisive. It was beaten by an independent horror film starring a clown on the same weekend. But I like it. I've only seen it once, so my opinions could change. I think it's really gutsy. I think it does a lot of things that we weren't expecting. I don't think it's a middle finger to the audience. I know a lot of people are like, oh, Todd Phillips is throwing up a middle finger to the audience. I don't think it's that. Even if he says it is, I don't think it's that. I think he says that to defend its performance. The best review I saw of it, someone said it's not a sequel, it's an appendix to the first one. And I think it's a really good way to look at it. I like what it does. I like that it challenges what you expect. I like that it breaks down what it built up because that's who the Joker is at his core. The Joker destroys everything. There is no sense to it. There's no continuity. He allows, temples to crumble. If you don't like this movie, I get it. It's weird and it does a lot of really strange things, but I enjoy it for what it is. And I'm only throwing it in there because I think people need to give it a second chance. Oh boy, I haven't even hit my top 10. We're still in honorable mentions. I'll rattle through these quickly. V for Vendetta, it's only in this and not my top 10 list because I haven't seen it enough and it's been a long time since I've watched it, but I do like V for Vendetta. On that same note, Constantine. Haven't seen it enough, but really like it. Excited at the possibility of Keanu returning to the role. I mentioned theatrical animated films before. There is another one that came out that's quite good, the Lego Batman movie. I really like that one also. Just not quite a top 10 one for me, but a solid DC entry. And finally, Wonder Woman. I think Wonder Woman is a pretty good film. It's not quite perfect. It does have a few uneven moments. When I first saw it, I was like, this is the best DC film ever. And then, a couple of days passed and I changed my opinion a little bit, but it is really strong. The No Man's Land sequence is excellent. All of the stuff on Themyscira is wonderful. Diana kind of adjusting to the world of man is beautiful. It's a great flick. Got some really good action sequences. I don't agree with the critiques of Gal Gadot's acting. I know she's not Daniel Day-Lewis, but no one is. I think that she brings a great energy to the character. I think she's fun. I think she can do the action. And I think, she might not be our top tier, like a great actress, but she's still doing some really fun stuff in film, and I like her in this role. All right, disclaimers done. Honorable mentions done. Let's crack into my top 10 favorite films that are current favorite films from the DC universe, all the DC films of all time. As I mentioned, the rules are they must have been released theatrically, and and they just fall under that DC banner. My opinion will probably change in the next 5 hours, but that's fine. So coming in at number 10, I'm going with a more classic approach, one from the 90s, and it's Batman Returns. Batman Returns is my favorite from that whole Tim Burton, Joel Schumacher era. I watched it recently, I just did the whole four again, and it just stands head and shoulders above the rest. It understands the characters more. I think Tim Burton is clearly a fan of the weird and he's a fan of villains, and he tends to lean into that more with his Batman films. But the dynamic between Catwoman and Batman is perfect in this film. Um, Michelle Pfeiffer is the best Catwoman we've had. I do like every iteration we've had, but I think they really nailed that dynamic. Yeah, Danny DeVito's Penguin is weird. That's not the Penguin. It's some sort of weird monster boy. But for what it is, I think it works pretty well. But the tone is great. Setting it at Christmas time is great. And overall, I just think it's a really well executed film. Here's how good that film is: it was deemed too dark for children, and they had a Happy Meal toy attached to it when it came out. So, yeah, I think of the early era, it's the best of the Batman films. So, number 10, Batman Returns. I really like it. Um, I think it's just really well done. Really well done. Um, Coming in at ninth place, it's going to be another divisive one, but it's Todd Phillips' Joker. I still remember seeing it in the theater when that title card came up, and it's so big it takes over the screen. The word Joker is too big for the screen itself. Joaquin Phoenix's performance is fantastic. I know that a lot of people feel it's not true Joker, it's not comic book Joker, especially with that sequel. But I think if you look at this as a standalone film, it's a really fascinating character study. It feels very reminiscent of Lee Bermejo's Joker graphic novel from the late 2000s, which was actually kind of inspiration or kind of tied in with The Dark Knight. But I think there's a lot of similarities there. I like the idea of them doing one bad day. Like, all you need is one bad day and it all falls apart. I like the focus on mental health. I like how they incorporated the Joker's laugh. Um, and I think it's a really fascinating study on mental health and what happens if you don't address mental health. So I know a lot of people say that's not the Joker, but the beautiful thing about the multiverse is that there's infinite versions of the character. And I think it's a really well told story. It's dark, it's gritty, it's gross. Um, he's not funny, but he's insane and thinks he is funny, which is true of the Joker. Um, I think it's just a really well executed film. It's not a fun movie. Oh boy, like I feel awful after it. But there's no denying it's an incredibly well crafted film. It tells a really interesting version of the Joker story. So number 9 for me is Joker. I should say as well, the other criteria for these films is rewatchability. How often do I watch them? Do I rewatch them often? Do I enjoy them? And whilst Joker isn't necessarily a fun film, I do like to sit down and watch that one. I've watched that one probably about half a dozen times. So in number 8, this might be divisive. I'm sure people are wondering where Superman is in this list, but remember it's DC movies, so Superman is coming, don't worry. In number 8, I'm going with Matt Reeves as the Batman from 2022, the Robert Pattinson version of Batman. If you remember all the way back to like episode 7 or 8, Nick and I did a ranking of Batman films, and at the time, The Batman was my number 1 Batman film. And I still agree it's one of the best Batman films we've ever had. I would still put it probably in the top 4. I love it. I think it's a really well crafted film. I like that it's only his second year. I like that he's not perfect. Um, I like the crime story. I like Paul Dano's Riddler. You guys know I'm a huge Paul Dano fan. I like Zoe Kravitz's Catwoman. It's just, it feels like year one in a lot of ways. If you've read the graphic novel Year One, so I really do like it. Um, the biggest killer for me for this film is the length. 3 hours long. Ironically, the next few movies are all about 3 hours long as well. But I do think this one could have probably been wrapped up a little bit sooner. I think the third act does carry on a bit long, although I do like the suggestion of Venom. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, The Batman, I think it's a wonderful movie. Coming in at 7th place, I'm getting to this list quicker than I thought I would, but that's okay. Again, another divisive one, but I think that might actually just be the DC universe. I think just the history of DC films has been divisive. I'm going to try and stop using that word. I'm going with Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice Ultimate Edition. If you've listened to the podcast, you know that when I first saw Batman v Superman in theaters, I hated it. I was really disappointed. I was at a point in my life where I couldn't really afford to do a lot of special things. I couldn't even afford to go to the movies. And Tina and I had to fork out quite a bit because the only session available on opening night was like at a deluxe screening, which is about 3 times the price. And from the moment they did the origin story with the pearls, I got worried because I'd just seen the pearls done in the previous franchise, and I just didn't dig it. And I couldn't understand why, because it had everything I should want in a film. It had Superman, it had Batman, it had Lex Luthor, it had all these wonderful elements. I just couldn't get my head around it. And then about 6 months later, I watched the Ultimate Edition, and I finally got it. And I did watch the theatrical cut a couple of times. I went to see it. I went back to see it in the theaters because I wanted to give it a second chance. The Ultimate Edition does a lot of heavy lifting. It fills in a lot of blanks. It's a really complex story. There's a lot of great moments in it. If you haven't seen the Ultimate Edition, I know every Snyder fan, including myself, will tell you to do it, but it's true. There's this weird relationship between studios and Zack Snyder where they want him to take on these huge projects and they give him the trust, and then the last minute, for the most part, they hack into his version of the film and release an inferior product. Ultimately, he does tell these complex stories. Um, and a lot of the stuff, like there's a scene in Batman v Superman where a woman was paid off by Lex Luthor to lie about what she saw when Superman came into like the village and protected Lois. That's not in the theatrical cut. That's a huge plot point. The costume design is incredible. Like both bat suits are amazing. This is the most brawler version of Batman we get to see. We get to see him lifting tires and standing naked in a shower, using sledgehammers to work out. He has the Dark Knight Returns iron armor, which I really like. It's not kryptonite powered in this, but in the comics there is kryptonite in the armor. We get to see a more tactical Batman, one we saw a little bit early on in Nolan's films. Um, and of course, that warehouse scene. I know everyone points to the warehouse scene, but it's incredible. It's so good. It's a great fight scene. It's a brutal Batman. This is obviously, I know a lot of people are like, Batman doesn't kill. Batman's too violent in this movie. Batman's always violent. Look at every Batman film. Every film, he either kills someone or lets someone die. That is just cinematic Batman at this point. If you have to excuse it, if you have to find a way around it, this is how I addressed it when I first saw that film because I wanted to rationalize it so I could appreciate it better. This is a Batman who has gotten to his 40s and has never seen hope before. He saw the issue with Gotham and tried to clean it up, but he never had a Justice League. He never had a Superman. He never had a Wonder Woman. He has been fighting a one-man war on crime for decades. Of course he's jaded and violent and brutal. That's the same thing that happened in Dark Knight Returns. Everyone got forced into retirement and crime came out again, and all the other superheroes just followed the rules, and Batman got fed up, and that's why he became angry and violent and stuff again. So if you have to justify it, that's your justification. It's a Batman who never had any help or any friends or any hope. But it's just a more complex film. Like even the studio didn't quite understand it. They were marketing it as a fight night movie. All their posters were like, it's fight night. They're going to fight. They're going to battle. And there is a fight scene, but it's more a battle of ideologies, which is maybe the most exciting idea for a comic book movie for everyone. But it's a different take, and I really like it. It's not as high as it used to be in my previous list. I think I had it like number 2 spot in my Batman films. It's probably moved around a little bit with as I rewatch all the films, but it's a good film. I think it's definitely underappreciated. I think it's definitely misunderstood. Um, just go in with fresh eyes. Go in with fresh eyes and give it another go. It's got some really great stuff in it. Which brings me to number 6, which is another Zack Snyder film, but it's not a Batman film. I'm going to Watchmen. I saw Watchmen in 2009. I'd never read the book before. I got to read it later on. I don't care which version of Watchmen you check out, whether it's the theatrical cut, the director's cut, or the ultimate cut, they're all excellent. This might be the most accurate adaptation of a comic book, with the exception of Sin City, which is not part of the DC universe. Um, he changed the ending, obviously, from a giant squid thing to like a nuclear bomb, essentially. But it's so effective. It's so powerful. It's just so well executed. It still, I think, holds the record, at least in my personal record, for best opening credits of any film ever. Ever. Just that slow motion intro to the Bob Dylan song, I think is perfect. The costuming is excellent. The casting is great. Jeffrey Dean Morgan as the comedian, maybe one of the best, kind of superhero slash vigilante castings of all time. He's excellent in it. Carla Gugino is great in it. Um, Patrick Wilson is Night Owl. It's visceral, it's violent, it's colorful, it's hyper realistic. Everything that people accuse Snyder of doing the wrong thing by, Watchmen, I think, proves why he needs to do it the way he does. Billy Crudup as Dr. Manhattan, like all the Dr. Manhattan stuff looks great. And the visuals hold up. Like this flick is getting on to be almost 20 years old. Like in a few years, it'll be 20 years old. It looks just as good as I did when I saw it in theaters, 17 years ago, 16 years ago. It's a really wonderful film. Jackie Earle Haley as Rorschach. It just, it captures everything that comic book was trying to do. Um, Again, I know people don't like Snyder's style, but I just say look at Watchmen, and if you don't like Watchmen, that's fine. There's definitely plenty of confronting elements of that film, and the stuff you won't like. I don't know if my wife could watch Watchmen again. When we saw it in theaters, she was a young woman. She didn't have a daughter. We didn't, it wasn't as prevalent, all the horrible violence against women that's going on now that seems to be in the news every day. I don't know if she could watch Watchmen again because there's some really tough stuff in it, but it doesn't shy away from it and it doesn't glamorize it. I think it really addresses those issues, um, and shows the duality of humanity. The idea that, like, even these costumed heroes who are supposed to protect us, even they've got this dark side, and even they're problematic and complicated and have their own issues, and in trying to do the right thing can cause more harm than good. I think it's an incredibly complex film. I think it's really well made. I think it's very entertaining. It's killer soundtrack. It's just a great flick. So Watchmen coming in at number 6. All right. At number 5, maybe my favorite Batman film of all time, if not very, very close to my favorite Batman film of all time. It's Batman Begins. Never has the origin of the character been done better. I think it's a perfect beginning origin story. Christian Bale is great in it. Katie Holmes, I do prefer as over Maggie Gyllenhaal. Maggie Gyllenhaal is great, but I feel like there's a better chemistry with Katie Holmes. You've got Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul. He's fantastic in it. Cillian Murphy, or Killian Murphy, I should say, as Scarecrow is excellent. Michael Caine, Morgan Freeman. Like, it's just brilliantly casted. Nolan's first Batman film. It's his most Batman film, I think. I love The Dark Knight, but I think Batman Begins really captures the ninja aspect, the tactical aspect of Batman more. That whole like scene at the docks where he's hiding in the shadows and he's dropping down and throwing batarangs and abducting dock workers one by one is incredible. Like, that is the most Batman. That, I think, goes, obviously the warehouse scene from BVS, I think, is better in terms of like seeing him as a fighter. But I would say in terms of being this kind of rogue in the shadows, I think Batman Begins nails it. The Joe Chill stuff is great. The court case is excellent. My dogs are barking because they disagree with me. That's totally fine. Like most Batman films, it's got a third act issue. It feels like every Batman film, they don't know what to do with the third act. They feel like they have to make this huge action set piece with exploding sewers and trains and floods and nuclear bombs and all sorts of stuff. It's Batman. It doesn't need to get that crazy. But even with that, I think it's a great Batman film. I really enjoy it. I try to watch it once a year. I love Batman Begins. And if somehow you haven't seen it, and I've spoiled some stuff for you, it doesn't matter. It's still great. Gary Oldman. Oh my God, Gary Oldman. Great as Jim Gordon. All right, we're coming to the pointy end. At number 4, it's one of the later DCEU entries, but I think it nails everything I want in a superhero film. It has the action, it has the characterization, the costumes, the humor, The family dynamic has everything I want from a hero film, and it's James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. That was probably my favorite film of 2021. Um, and looking back, I haven't watched it in a minute, but I've watched it a bunch, and it's really great. Idris Elba as Bloodshot, a character I'd never heard of. I've read a bunch of comics, I'd never heard of Bloodshot, which is a poor reflection on me, I know. He was great in it. John Cena, a guy who I was like, really, the wrestler dude? He's going to be in the film? His Peacemaker, which we've seen in the show, is incredible. And so incredible to go from that version in the movie, The Suicide Squad, to then go into his own show and to have such a change in character. Margot Robbie as Harley is great. Um, I really enjoyed her probably the most in this film. She had the most to do. Even though she's front and center in all those films, I think this is the best version of her. Um, Rick Flag gets a much better go this time. He was okay in Suicide Squad. I don't think the 2016 Suicide Squad film is as bad as people make it out to be, but this one he got a lot more to do. David Desmalchin as Polka Dot Man was unexpected and wonderful. Sylvester Stallone as King Shark. I love King Shark. King Shark is such a great character. I've always liked him since I found out. I think every version we've seen of him is great. There's not a bad version of King Shark, but this one is probably my favorite. Yeah, I think it's just really well executed. You got some great villains, not just the villains on the Suicide Squad, but antagonists to the Suicide Squad. I think using Starro as the villain was such a great idea. What a great idea! It's colorful. It's got a kicking soundtrack. Everything about it, I really dig. Knowing that he made that film and then he was going to take over running the new DCU made me very happy and very excited. I know people say you can't be a Snyder fan and a Gunn fan. That's a lie. You can. You can appreciate the old and get excited for the new. And I'm very, very excited for the new. Speaking of Zack Snyder, in third spot, I told you I was going to break my own rules, and here's the rule I'm going to break. This is the one film that did not get a theatrical release because of COVID, but I think also because this streaming service needed products and films to stream, this film got a second life, and it's Zack Snyder's Justice League. So finally, after 7 movies, we're finally at a Superman film. I love Zack Snyder's Justice League. I don't care that it's 4 hours long. I don't care about the slow motion. It is a spectacle. It's really good. And if you bought it on physical media, like you should buy all your movies, it comes on 2 discs. So you can watch it over 2 nights. You don't have to watch 4 hours in a row. But I'm also guilty of binge watching 4 hours of The Office. And if I'm doing it, you're doing it too. So you can totally watch 4 hours of Justice League. It's a much better conclusion to the story he set up. Unfortunately, we should have got more. I would have loved to have seen more of this universe. If you watch the theatrical cut of Justice League, which is really hard to do now, I'm not a negative person. I don't like to talk poorly of any film. You know this. Last year, I did watch these back to back. I was like, let me try the OG versus the Snyder Cut. And I hadn't watched the 2017 version since the Snyder Cut came out. And it was really hard to watch because I just knew all the missed opportunities they had. This film is perfectly cast. All your Justice League members are great. I know Ezra Miller has been a problematic figure in the public. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Very few of us who have to go through a mental breakdown or some sort of mental unwellness have to do it in the public eye. Ezra Miller had to do that. I understand that that person is going through therapy and is working on themselves and getting better. I hope they are feeling better. I hope they are working on themselves. Regardless of their personal issues, we have to separate art from artist. And Ezra Miller as the Flash is really good, especially in this version, especially at the speed of force at the end of this movie. All of the fight scenes, the CGI on Steppenwolf is incredible. It's a much better version of Steppenwolf that we got in the theatrical cut. Wonder Woman coming to the museum and saving the children was great in the theatrical. It's better in this. All the Atlanta stuff is wonderful. We get the Flash's intro where he's in Central City and he sees Iris and he saves her from the truck and he's applying for the job. And again, at the speed of force, it's so good. The nightmare sequence is even better because we get to see a dead Kilowog and like fallen warriors. We have the end credits nightmare sequence. We've got Martian Manhunter. We've got Darkseid. Darkseid is one of my favorite characters of all time. I know he was created before Thanos, and people think that each other are a ripoff. I don't care that they're similar. I like Thanos in the movies better than the comics. Darkseid in the comics is amazing. He's such a great villain. He's just evil for evil's sake. And I love that we got him. We got Granny Goodness. We got Desaad. Oh my god, if you've ever read Rock of Ages, the Justice League story, Desaad is a great character. Desaad also shows up in Apocalypse War, the animated film, and is a great, like, almost like a herald of Darkseid, but also he's like chief torturer and stuff. Oh, it's so good. Like, it flies by for me. Those 4 hours are quick for me. If Zack Snyder is not your kind of director, if his style is not yours, I can't say you want this film. There's no way to say you want it because it's not your thing. But if you are open to it, it's just a masterpiece. And all the Superman stuff is so good. So Zack Snyder's Justice League is number 3 for me. All right, we're down to the final two. The last two are my top 10 DC films. If you feel like I haven't unpacked them enough, you feel like I'm kind of rattling through them quickly, look, I'm aware there's just not, I don't have any co hosts today. I could talk about these for ages, but at the end of the day, do you want to listen to me talk for 3 hours? You just want to hear my top 10 and go home. You probably just want to go back to it all. So coming in at number 2, this was very nearly my number 1 film, and I was going back and forth on it because this next film I really like. And the reason I like this film so much is, first of all, again, I think it's underappreciated. I think people didn't necessarily miss the point, but I think it's a lot more criticism than it deserves. It launched an era. Um, and for a lot of people, it was a gateway to this character, for myself included. This character I was not a fan of growing up. I didn't read the comics. I didn't read comics till I was in my late 20s. I never watched the animated series. I'd never had much exposure to this character, and I honestly thought this character was kind of boring. This film made me excited about the character, and after watching it, I did read the comics and I did consume the other media. And now I understand that whilst this film doesn't contain maybe the most beloved version of the character, I think it's totally worthy. I think it's just as good an entry, even if it doesn't reflect what people want from that character. I think it's a really great version of it. And I think it's a good gateway point for people who are in the position that I was in. I'm talking about Man of Steel. I was not a Superman fan. I thought he was boring. I'd never read a comic. I had recently come out of a few-year stint with the church, and I often saw Superman as flying Jesus. And I didn't like the whole Boy Scout goody two shoes routine, not understanding that that's not Superman. Like, yes, he is friendly and nice and helpful and good, but he is also tough and assertive and a protector. And I didn't really understand that when I was younger. And Man of Steel, I think, does a really good job. Just like how I had to kind of compartmentalize that in BVS, this Batman had never had a friend, basically. All the only friends he had been taken from him. This is a Superman who's never had to fight before. He's never had to fight a war or a battle or even in the parking lot. And when he has gotten close to fights, he's been told to turn the other cheek because he would kill them if he fought them. And we see that represented in the film. There are bullies who pick on him, and Clark has to just sit and take it because he knows if he takes a swing, he could send a guy halfway across the state. Um, it's a grounded, more human approach. This is a Superman who does. I wouldn't say revenge is part of his character, but he does give people what they deserve, as demonstrated by the waitress in the bar when he destroys the truck. He does kind of stand up for himself and stick up for people in a way that maybe we weren't expecting Superman to do, because he is a little more human in this one. He does feel things. People criticize the destruction. I mean, it's two gods flying through a city. What would you expect? No one cared about the destruction in the Godzilla vs. Kong films. Like, it's the same thing. This is a Superman who hasn't had to worry about protecting everyone because he's never been in a fight before. He's never faced a foe like Zod, or the rest of Zod's crew. He's never faced this before. So, of course, there's going to be collateral damage. Of course, he's going to struggle with it. Of course, there's going to be people hurt. Of course, the city is going to get reduced to ashes. And they course correct. That's one of the driving motivators behind Batman and BVS. It all ties in. I love Russell Crowe as Jor-El. I think he's fantastic. I like oh my goodness, I'm forgetting everyone's name. Um, Diane Lane as Martha is wonderful. You know, Kevin Costner as Pa Kent is great. All the casting is really good. You know, everyone in it is fantastic. Um, Michael Shannon as Zod is one of the best villains ever. The whole opening sequence on Krypton, oh my god, visually stunning, like so good. And Jor-El gets something to do. You know, normally Jor-El's role in these films is to die. In this, he does die. Spoiler alert for a 12-year-old movie, but he gets to fight and he gets to try and protect the legacy of Krypton. And he gives his son the choice of free will, which is really good. Um, and I don't think it's too dark. I don't think it is without hope or emotion. I don't think it's cold. Yes, there are decisions in the film and there are consequences. Yes, Clark has to let his father die. But he'd never had to run that fast to save Park Kent before. We have no idea if he'd be fast enough. He probably would be. But we also don't know what the impact of that would be. If he ran that fast to catch Park Kent, would the impact of catching him kill Park Kent? You know, like there's all these things we don't know. Um, the whole scene where he's like, "Never touch my mother," he's beating the crap out of Zod is wonderful. Seeing him like save all the people on the oil tanker from the burning like funnel or whatever it is great. Henry Cavill's a great Superman. I'm not one of those people who's like, "There's only one Superman, and it's Henry Cavill, and all else are terrible." David Corn Sweat looks great. I cannot wait. I'm literally less than a day, or just about a day away from seeing this film, and I cannot wait to see Corn Sweat as Superman. I think every version of Superman is great, but I do like this one. This one feels like Superman as a god, which is great. My next Superman doesn't need to be godlike. He can be a little more physically human. This one is obviously very emotionally human, and that's okay. But Henry Cavill is wonderful. Um, I just I just smile when I watch this film. I think it's a great action film. The score, I haven't talked about the music in many of these films. Hans Zimmer's score in Man of Steel, particularly, it's good in all the films, but particularly in Man of Steel, is epic. The flight music, all the fight scenes, all that music, it's just wonderful. You know, people argue the theme is less recognizable than the John Williams stuff. Of course, the John Williams stuff is very charactery. It's very, and Danny Elfman like is very big and theatrical. And this Hans Zimmer one is not that. It's not theatrical. It's going for more tones. But that flight music is incredible. I love Man of Steel. It was for the longest time my number one. There is one movie I'm going to put above it, and it's only because I prefer the character. I would say these films are very nearly equals, which brings me to number one. My number one DC film for today is, of course, The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is just one of those flicks, you know? It transcends genre, it transcends comics. I think you can show The Dark Knight to any person on earth as long as they like film, and they will find something to love about it. Even though this Batman makes a few more mistakes, a few more miscalculations, he's constantly chasing the Joker. He's never quite up to speed until the very end. That's okay. That's what this story is. It's got so many wonderful moments. The scene at the fundraiser where the Joker shows up and he grabs the champagne flute and he empties it before he can even take a drink. Michael Caine again. Heath Ledger is obviously incredible. And I've heard theories, people say take Heath Ledger out of the movie and you don't have a very good movie. That logic applies to every film in the history of film. If you take out a major character, of course it's a different film. Like, what are you talking about? That's dumb. The truck flipping scene is incredible. The opening scene, I just talked about this, I think, well, actually, in a future episode. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to talk about The Dark Knight again with someone else. But the whole opening sequence, to begin a Batman film called The Dark Knight in the light of day, is such a great little twist, and that sequence is incredible. That droning sound, again, Hans Zimmer, that music is awesome. Aaron Eckhart as Harvey Dent is perfect. Everything from his, kind of not trusting Bruce Wayne and not quite sure like who is on his side, that whole kind of suspicion, all the way through to his evolution and change into the character of Two-Face. And yeah, his Two-Face is not quite as nuanced as maybe people wanted. Like, he's less kind of arguing with his two inner halves and more just angry. But this is also the very first day of him being Two-Face. I'm going to leave him some room. Um, we've got Eric Roberts as Sal Maroni. Great character. Um, Again, Gary Oldman, I think, deserves so much props. Like, the relationship between Batman and Gordon in these films, particularly The Dark Knight, is outstanding. The Tumbler, the pod, the Bat Pod bike. I could just list words from this movie, and you'd be like, "Yep, I understand. It's great." Um, yeah, I think it's no surprise. I think most people would agree that The Dark Knight is probably a top tier um, DC film, top tier Batman film, top tier comic book film. It's on the top list for most people, but for very good reason. It's just an excellent movie. Um, and that's it. That's my list. So you've got a couple of honorable mentions. If you haven't seen some of those flicks, definitely like Swamp Thing. I would recommend checking out Constantine, V for Vendetta, films that people are talking about, aren't talking about as much. History of Violence, and Stardust. All those movies definitely check out. Um, and yeah, I know that I'm sure my my list will anger some people. I know I left out some classics. It feels like most of my films are from like the year 2005 onwards. But that's when I started watching movies. I'm an 80s kid. I was born in the late 80s, but I didn't start watching movies aggressively until I was a teenager. I started going to the movies on my own when I was 17, maybe 16. Um, so a lot of the movies before then were VHS watches for me. I'd go to the video store and I'd watch them, and I enjoy them, and I like them a lot. But they just, I don't have that emotional connection to them because they're before my time. Doesn't mean they're not relevant. Doesn't mean they're not valid. Doesn't mean they're not good. They're all great. But this is my top 10 list as of today. I'm sure my opinion will change by the time I post this, and I'll have regrets and want to change things around. Um, I'm going to sneeze. No, I'm not. I'm going to finish the episode. But there we go. Um, Happy Superman weekend, everyone. If you haven't seen Superman yet, go out and support it. It looks great. It's tracking well, which I'm not surprised by. I don't think anyone is surprised by, except for the very small vocal minority who want this movie to fail. I think it's going to do the money it needs to do. It was just announced this morning that David Corenswet has signed an agreement to have multiple appearances as Superman. They've announced a bunch of spin-offs. It sounds like there might be a Mr. Terrific spin-off. Nathan Fillion has confirmed he's going to be playing Guy Gardner in the Green Lantern show. Apparently, there is a Jimmy Olsen thing happening. I'm very excited about that. And there was murmurs as of this morning that there is some form of Justice League thing coming, which, good, there should be. We need more Justice League. We've had 4 Avengers films in the last decade. How have we not had one Justice League film? Because even though they're two very different films, they're basically based on the same script. So we need more Justice League stories, and I'm here for it. And we're going to have Hawk Girl. Oh my God, Hawk Girl's going to be there. Green Lantern. I can't wait. So happy Superman weekend, everyone. Go and see it. I hope you love it. Let me know what you think. I can't wait to check it out. I've heard from a couple of close friends who have gone to see it already that it's pretty good. So I'm very, very keen. Next week, I have an interview that is DC adjacent. I am speaking to Aaron Bennett, who directed that viral short, Joker's Wild, which went on YouTube earlier this year. So more DC content coming. If you haven't checked out the short yet, it's like 10 minutes. Go watch it on YouTube and then listen to that episode. And then after that, the Pod Squad will be back. We're also, I keep forgetting to do this. We're on all sorts of social media now. Instagram is still our hub. So if you want all your content, go to Instagram. I Was a Teenage Film Snob. That's where all our videos are, all our reviews, all our episode clips. But we are now on TikTok. I don't understand TikTok, but we are there. We're on YouTube. All the episodes are now streaming on YouTube as well. So if you like to listen on YouTube Music, you can check us out there. And most of the reviews and clips are going on YouTube Shorts. We're on Threads. I don't understand Threads either. But go and check us out there. It's the content is pretty much the same everywhere, but Instagram has most of it. So go check it all out. Our shirts are still for sale. We'll probably do a new shirt in the next 12 months. I know that seems like a long way away, but we've talked about it. We want to do more merch, but one step at a time. Also, I am going to be on the Movie Bonus podcast. I think it's in the first week of August, so I'll pimp that as it gets closer as well. But I got to talk about a lot of DC related stuff, even though that wasn't the topic of the week. I just talk about whatever I like. Clearly, thank you so much for listening to the show. I hope you dug my list. Send me your list. DM me on Instagram or respond to the show notes or comment on Spotify. Whatever. Tell us your list. What are your 10 favorite DC films? Are you excited for Superman? Are you excited for this new DCU? I'm keen for it. Obviously, I'm a fan of everything. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And as we say every week on this show, guys, I was a teenage film snob, but I'm trying to be better. We'll see you next week.